Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Revolution Evolution. I am your host, Gregory of Revolution Evolution. Tonight is going to be the first time I do this, and it surely won't be the last. I am being joined with honors by Jason Call, who is running for Congress in Washington State's second congressional district. I'm not sure the demographics, the location, and such on where the area is at, but I'm sure if I looked on the statistical atlas, it could tell me where it's at. Jason, do you mind telling us a bit about yourself, what you stand for, and all that?
Absolutely. So I'll first say that I'm honored to be here. Also, I'm glad you reached out to me for this. Looking forward to the conversation. The district is Northwest Washington, that is right above Seattle, right north of Seattle, and goes like Pramila Jayapal has the district south of me. And this district goes up to the Canadian border and includes the islands in the North Puget Sound. So that probably, that'll give you an idea of where the location is. It's west of the Cascade Mountains and just south of Vancouver, Canada.
Oh, that's cool. I know exactly where you're at now because I worked in the past in nonprofit with somebody from that general area.
Yeah. Beautiful area of the country. We've got mountains, we've got oceans, we've got forests, and one of the things that I'm running on in my campaign is climate change. And I warn people we've got more coastline than most districts in the entire country. So when those tides really start to rise, we are definitely going to be impacted here in my district.
Yeah, I was talking about the climate issue there. I've seen, like, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the animations online of the sea level rise. If all of the ice caps and the polar ice melted, it would greatly devastate much of northwestern Washington State. Not only there, but it would also impact areas where I live in, like in coastal Georgia, Florida, and a lot of the eastern seaboard, but a whole host of areas. And that's why we need to tackle the climate crisis. And I've addressed that on my show, and my good friend Sandy with Environmental Coffee House discusses it very in even greater detail than I do. And as I was looking up your platform earlier, I'll see that you're, and from what I was told by Joseph Firestone, who is a partner of Revolution Evolution, that you are, in fact, a fellow Red Beret, a fighter of Medicare for All. And I love that. That's one of the reasons why I reached out to you to kick off the series of candidate interviews, is because you are an advocate for true Medicare for all, not the watered down version that's currently been circulating around the House and the Senate.
Well, where I'll be honest, where I prefer to be is a more UK style national health service, where our hospitals and our government run, and our doctors and nurses and support staff are paid by the federal government, rather than by private institutions who are trying to make a profit. That would be ideal for me. I certainly think profit has no place in healthcare. And I remember watching Michael Moore's movie Sicko back in 2000, 2007, 2008, and even hosting house parties for that, because Michael was releasing his movie and wanting to get it out before the 2008 election, specifically because in the hope that President Obama, who we hoped would be President Obama at the time, would actually move on a single payer healthcare system. So he went all around the world, and talked about other countries' healthcare systems and where the United States is failing. But obviously, when Obama got into the office, we didn't get what we were hoping for on healthcare. And I don't even say that, there are some bits of the ACA that are an improvement for some people, but it still leaves 30 million people in this country without any health care, and another, 60, 70 million people horribly underinsured so that they can't even effectively seek a doctor. But, Joe Firestone is a friend. I've been on his show before. I've been a member of the Red Berets since its inception. I think that was back in 2018. Laura Fielding is a good friend of mine.
Oh man, I love Laura Fielding. She and
Yeah.
I are really good friends.
Fantastic. Yeah. Laura and I get to see each other every now and again. She's not that far from me.
I've worked with Laura Fielding like when the Cornel West campaign came to the Green Party. I worked with her on several tweet storms. And back to what you were saying on the healthcare front, I agree 110%. We need to abolish all of this private health insurance companies, these for-profit private health insurance companies like Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, etc. If we went to a Medicare for all system, and this is the economics of it, and this was told by Joe Firestone here recently. Currently, we spend as a country on annual 4.3 to 4.4 trillion, and he said that it would be a major tax cut to the middle class. And
absolutely,
and I hear a lot of Medicare for all advocates talk about that. But the one thing that I don't hear Medicare for all advocates talking about is how much money does every state as a whole, all across this country, spend on Medicare for all, and I mean on Medicaid services and other healthcare services. And I looked up that each state as a whole, that would also be an additional tax cut on the state level.
Absolutely.
And you would think that these Republican state governors who are chomping at the bits would be okay and support Medicare for all because they're no longer having to cover Medicaid, CHIP, all or their state-based initiatives for children's health insurance. Like, you hear a lot of people in the arguments and they say, oh, well, it's going to kick children off of their health care. And what I was told and what I've understood in all my research looking at the bills on Medicare for all, it would cover every man, woman, and child across this country. So there would be no need for all of these wasteful.
I mean, that's the whole point. The whole point is the federal government covers the bills. The states don't have to cover the bills. Employers don't have to cover the bills. And depending upon where you are on MMT economics, and I know if you know Joe, you're probably well versed on MMT economics.
I am staunchly modern money theory. Like, Joe even told me that you were an MMT guy as well.
Yeah. So I mean, the reality is the federal government can pay for it, and the way you cut inflation costs in general with an MMT theory is that you spend on areas that are going to help human beings, and you cut waste out of things that don't have any real return to the economy, like the military budget, for example. The Congressional Budget Office did a study in February of last year, so a year and a half ago. This came out, and they analyzed Medicare for all and said that it would save the United States somewhere in the neighborhood of $430 billion every year. So the big lie about Medicare for all is that Republicans and some Democrats, because plenty of Democrats buy into this, they say, oh, that's a $32 trillion spending bill. Where are you coming up with that money? And if you go back to what you just said, $4 trillion over 10 years, because they're talking about over 10 years. $4 trillion over 10 years, and it's just going to increase. I mean, it's $4 trillion this year. It's going to be $6 trillion 10 years down the road. You're talking about over $40 trillion. So they're absolutely lying and using a sleight of hand to get the American public opposed to Medicare for all. But going back to the state-based single-payer movement that I'm involved with and that Laura is involved with. So I'm on the board of Whole Washington. You probably know Whole Washington.
Yes, I know all about Whole Washington. another friend of mine who's also another Red Beret there in Washington, Amber.
Yeah, Amber
Griego.
Griego,
Yeah, she is also on board with that. She's part of the whole Washington movement as well.
Yep.
Then you have other movements like CalCare. You've got
New York's got one, Massachusetts.
New York's got one, Minnesota, Maine.
Yep.
It's a whole host of states that do have it.
So the problem that we have at the state level, because you said Republican legislatures or Republican governors are avoiding Medicare for all, but it's Democrats also, because Washington State, we have a democratically controlled state legislature in both our House and our Senate, and our bill, the whole Washington single payer bill, is called the whole Washington Health Trust. We've had it introduced in our state Senate 3 times. We do have support for it. We had 7 signers last time. And the chair of the Senate Health Committee in Washington State is a former hospital administrator. And all these people on the health committees, Republicans and Democrats alike, they take bags of money from the for-profit health insurance industry, whether it's pharma, whether it's hospital associations, dental associations. This is not a legislature in Washington State that works for the people, at least in regards to healthcare. So, the state governments are bought and paid for in the same way that our federal Congress is bought and paid for by those, for-profit industries. And of course, the American public suffers as a result.
Yes, they do. In the shows that Joe Firestone and myself conducted on the Dumping the Corruption, we've noted that a lot of the Democrats and Republicans on the federal level, they take money from major hospital or corporations. They take the big money from big pharmaceutical companies, private health insurance entities. And that's like scratching the surface looking for the PAC money. Like what about the super PAC funds that come in from the for-profit health insurance, the healthcare industry?
That's a whole different story. You're right. You've got money on the books that we can see and we can identify, and then there's just tons of money off of the books to try and kill these efforts for basically progressive populist legislation.
And that's why we need to get people like you who are Red Berets all across this nation who are staunch advocates of Medicare for all, and who's willing to not back down and force a vote on Medicare for all.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that way, if you and a lot of other Greens got elected into office and y'all did force the vote on Medicare for all, and a certain amount of politicians voted against Medicare for all, then that would give us another focus on how many other politicians that we need to either to dump as a result.
Yeah. The reality is, we've got over half the Democrats, I believe, are signed on to Pramila Jayapal's Medicare for All bill in the House. Only 2 of them in Washington State, Pramila herself and Adam Smith. None of the others will sign on to it. So people have this idea of Washington State as some kind of progressive bastion of sanity here, but the truth is, at the federal level, we're really not. We have most of our elected officials here at the federal level are this New Democrat coalition, and New Democrats are explicitly pro-business. They are anti-progressive, and one of the things that frustrates the hell out of me with the Progressive Caucus itself is that they've opened up their doors so wide that they're letting people into a progressive circle who have no business being there whatsoever. So it doesn't matter if you're the largest caucus within the Democratic Party, you're not a progressive caucus anymore.
They are not progressive by a long shot because talking back to what Joe Firestone and I did together, we dissected all of the campaign finances coming in from the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and a whole host of them were either taking money from the pharmaceutical industry, from private health insurance companies, even when we get into the show later on, that you even have a lot of them that are bought and paid for by the military industrial complex.
Absolutely. And the way campaign finance works is you'll go into the the congressional record. You can go to the FEC. You can look at who's giving them money, and campaigns will shuffle tens, 20, $30,000 back and forth between each other. And under a system like that, let's say you've got somebody who's a progressive candidate, but they're taking $20,000 from somebody who's not a progressive representative, and that other person is taking bags of money from terrible people. It all gets thrown into the mix. So our campaign finance laws, the reality is nobody is clean, and that's why we need publicly funded elections.
Exactly. And if we're going to have true democracy in this country, we're going to have to move away. We're going to have to totally scrap and abolish the current campaign finance system and move to publicly funded elections.
Absolutely.
And to force our members of Congress, our U.S. senators, to actually work for the donations from their constituents, rather than them go to backroom meetings together where they all love each other.
Well, my opinion of publicly funded elections is that we devise a system where any candidate who is a viable candidate, that is, you go out and get signatures in your community for your office. So when you're saying enough people want you to be on the ballot, and they get a certain amount of funds that they can spend for their race, and you can't spend out of that. And we eliminate super PACs, we eliminate outside money groups. People can make statements, but there shouldn't be any super PAC political advertising on television. It's really gotten so out of hand that with disclosures. I mean, California just passed a couple of good bills saying that any political ads have to fully disclose where their money is coming from. We don't have that as a federal standard right now, and we need to. So people are out there being lied to, unfortunately, in this country. In terms of politics, you can openly lie about whatever and nobody's going to hold you accountable, but a lot of people simply don't know that that's what the case is.
Exactly. And I see right here also on your campaign website where you're also a very strong proponent of the Green New Deal and everything that you support with in terms of climate policy. Like, what is, like, and this is a question that I want to ask you, what is your opinion on an agricultural bill which would subsidize our farmers to start growing hemp so we can start producing hemp and hemp fuels? And not only hemp fuels, we can be making plastics and other stuff. Like, what is your opinion on hemp as a whole?
I'm 100%. I'm 100% in support of hemp. Always have been. I was actually, and I know I'm just going to say this, that hemp and cannabis are not the same thing, but I'm also
they're not.
I'm also a cannabis activist, and I was part of the movement here in Washington State to get us to be the first I-502 back in 2012, when we got the signatures and passed the legislation by a vote in our legislature, and we became the first state in the country, along with Colorado, to fully legalize cannabis for recreational purposes. But certainly hemp is a plant, and it is one of the most useful plants that has developed on this green earth, and we should be utilizing it absolutely for fuel and for textiles, and also to repair soil, because it's a nitrogen fixer in the soil. So you can actually grow crops.
Talking about hemp, I don't support the conflict in Ukraine, but in the environmental sense, I can support a green reconstruction in Ukraine, because you've got to look at all that topsoil that is contaminated from all those bombs in this war. And you got to think about how you're going to rejuvenate the soil right there. And I think hemp would do really great in that area.
I can't speak to that. It sounds reasonable. I know that hemp can repair soil in many ways, but mentioning Ukraine, Ukraine is a vast supplier of liquefied natural gas. There is no question that conflicts like Ukraine, and of course we know about Iraq and Afghanistan,
Mhm.
a lot of these are for natural resources. They are for limited natural resources. And if we were to find a way to a Green New Deal and sustainable and renewable energy, of course, you're going to take the profit out of it for these giant fossil fuel conglomerates. But what you're going to do is you're going to have cheap and renewable energy for everybody around the world, and you're going to eliminate that source of conflict. And so I think if we are going to look seriously at global peace, the Green New Deal has to be a part of it, because we have so many conflicts that are based on resource extraction, not just open war conflicts like we've got going on in the Ukraine and the Middle East, but the conflicts that will send the CIA historically for the United States around the world to other countries to overthrow democratically elected leaders who want to do something as bold as nationalize their own country's resources. We've seen that so many times.
And that's
So
what
yeah,
they're trying to do in Mexico right now
yep,
with
yep,
AMLO.
yeah, for sure. So
And
yeah,
I see also other environmental policies that you do support is a Green New Deal for cities as well. Like, I love that, like the water filtration systems and such
yep,
and
yep.
I love how you're for 100% renewable energy. Like I hear like a lot of discussion on solar, wind, and geothermal. What is your take on tidal wave energy as well?
I am in support of it. We would have to do it in a way that limits its impact on marine environments. I'm sure we have the capability of doing that, but actually that's one of the things again that I talk about with the location of my district and having more coastline than most districts in the entire country. We are ripe for investment in tidal energy production here in my district and in Washington State in general. Absolutely in support of it. You mentioned geothermal. Like, we're sitting here on the Ring of Fire in the Pacific Coast. We certainly have massive opportunities. We got, volcano. I step out my door and I can see 4 volcanoes. You know what I mean? So, I mean,
I
we
step
definitely have
I step
geothermal
out of
activity
I
here.
step out of my front door and all I see is pine trees and
Well, I
oaks and
see a ton of
hardwoods.
pine trees too. That's one of the beautiful things about living in this part of the world is we do. I can look out from my front door and I can see tidal energy and geothermal energy happening. And God knows with global warming right now, I've got solar panels on my own house. So I get 88% efficiency on them. So and the solar technology, I bought my solar panels a decade ago, and solar technology has increased so much right now that I could double at least the production that I'm getting out of the existing panels that I have, or my existing array, if I had upgraded to what the technology is today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting good production for where the technology was 10 years ago, but there's massive advances. And so we should be investing so that all buildings have solar technology and they are green built. There's a lot of cities that buy into, like, any new construction has to be green built and has to meet certain standards. We need to make sure that that is a federal standard and that we are getting federal subsidies for it. It's the only way we're going to survive the future.
Exactly. And what we can also do in terms of the buildings like you're talking about, they they literally have window panes that double as solar collectors, and you could send it to like the photovoltaic cells to store up. And if you have like a whole, like, let's say like a 50-story skyscraper in an urban area like Seattle, or I don't know, or Atlanta, you could take that skyscraper and have all the windows be solar collector panes, and you could power a whole bunch of that city with just that one skyscraper alone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's places in Scandinavia that are working on technology that's roadway technology. Like they're literally having public transportation getting recharged on their own, rechargeable roadways. And these are the kind of innovations that we need to, it really is a massive overhaul. I mean, it's just huge to think about the changes that are going to need to take place, but it's also terrifying to recognize what is actually going on with global temperature anomalies right now, and to know that that's not going away. Like next year is going to be worse than this year. We have record high temperature anomalies in our oceans. This year, it's going to be worse next year because we are melting Arctic ice and Antarctic ice like crazy. We're going to have that doomsday glacier is probably going to break off sometime within the next year, and then you're going to see some really rapid sea level rises. So I don't think people really understand what is coming or the potential of what is coming if we don't make some changes immediately.
Did you ever monitor Hurricane Idalia here recently, how it did the rapid intensification? It started like right off of Yucatan Peninsula. It came right up through where I live here in Georgia. It come right up into Florida. The eye of it came right through right here in Georgia.
Yeah.
Like that storm like that has rapidly, and one of the wake up calls that just how bad in a hurricane could get was like, I think this is back in like 2018, 2019. There was like one that I think it was Hurricane Maria that came in and wiped out all of Antigua and Barbuda in the Caribbean.
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico.
It destroyed the island of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has not yet recovered from that hurricane years ago. So yeah, that was.
They are far from a recovery. Yeah. Just like in Lahaina, it's going to be years for either of those two to even fully recover.
Yeah, and then what happens in situations like Lahaina? You see that the vulture capitalists are coming in and seeing where they can, profit off of people's suffering and misery in order to acquire more land. So,
and I also see where you also discuss in your platform where the need for a major investment in high-speed rail as well.
High-speed rail, but I'll be honest with you, high-speed rail in terms of and don't get me wrong here, because I'm fully supportive of high-speed rail. High-speed rail will hopefully eventually supplant aviation, but the real pollution problem is local transportation, and the fact that we've got that 82% of the pollution that comes from the transportation industry comes from cars and trucks. That is people, and we see this. I know you see it in Atlanta. I've heard about traffic in Atlanta. Never been to
traffic. I see it whenever I go to Atlanta. And also, like an hour south of me, we're in Savannah, Georgia. It's bad. Okay. And something that I would support it for in terms of that is all of the public transit vehicles going to either hemp fuels or electric. And what they could do is they could take at their terminals, they could take on top of the structures, like, and put solar panels there and have solar chargers there.
Yeah, absolutely.
At their terminals and we can have green public transit systems that are either powered by electric vehicles or, hemp fuel.
Sure. Absolutely. I think we have to have electricity production that is not reliant on burning coal. That is a key right now. And I think, China is making some good strides. One of the reasons China is a massive polluter is obviously they've got a massive population of 1.5 billion people. I mean, we don't even come close in terms of population. So they have that energy production need, but they are actually making some strides in advancements for sustainable energy production, alongside the fact that they are still building coal-fired plants, but we're still building coal-fired plants too. But I wanted to go back to the rail for a second. So we talked about high-speed rail, but really what we need more than that, and in more immediate sense, to get cars and trucks off the road, because shipping, trucking is a hugely polluting industry. And part of the reason is that we don't have good policy in place to utilize existing rail or build new rail for local freight. That is, containers that come off of ships in ports. You have trucks just sitting there waiting to carry those, especially locally, because it's not profitable for rail carriers to, or it's not profitable for shippers to use rail for like the cost is cheaper for them. The structure of the pricing is cheaper for them to use trucks. Well, we need to make sure that we have policies in place where it is cheaper for them to use local rail to ship something 20, 30 miles away from a port rather than stick it on a truck. Like anything over 700 miles, or sorry, let me reverse that. Anything under 700 miles is going to get put on a truck, on a a diesel burning truck, rather than put on a rail system. Rail is really only used for stuff that goes over 700 miles, and that's due to the pricing structure of rail shipping. And so if we could get some policies in place that would allow people to use local rail for transportation of goods, we'd see a significant reduction in trucks on the road.
And that's also why I would support, talking about that. You could take those same diesel trucks, these diesel pickup trucks, any vehicle that uses diesel or gasoline, and make the same type of fuel from hemp.
Yep.
And it would emit absolutely no carbon at all. And not to mention, it would also filter out so much carbon from the atmosphere and sequester that. If any carbon is burnt from hemp, the hemp leaves itself will sequester that little bit of carbon, and you would not even notice any trace of carbon.
Yeah, I'm with you. When it comes down to sort of long range projections, hemp definitely could be the thing that saves the future. I've got no doubt about that.
Exactly, and we also need leaders that are willing to go to the UN and discuss the global Green New Deal, not only to help save our planet and all that, but also at a peacekeeping level from the foreign policy standpoint. Because whether we know it or not, the most common enemy that every nation has is climate change. And instead of waging a war on each other, we need to be waging a war on the climate to get climate change under control and reverse all of this harm.
Well, I think the reality is, and one of the things that we've really got to accept is that the Paris Accords are way outdated. They were never sufficient, and there's really no mechanism to hold people accountable to them. These COP conferences on global warming and climate change are lobbyist driven, and I do not believe that we have a real serious climate change movement at a governmental level. I think every Western government in the world, for sure, is absolutely tied to the fossil fuel industry. You have one or two brave souls who will speak out against it. But in general, they all seem to fall in line behind the fossil fuel industry, and the changes that they make are incremental and not systemic, and we need systemic change. And we do need global cooperation for this.
Exactly, and we need to, and this also ties back to the people that take the big money, and if we don't dump the ones that take the big money from the fossil fuel industry, then we're doomed. We're going to reach that doomsday peak where we're reaching a point of no return.
Yeah. Well, again, speaking in realistic terms, we have already reached points of no return. There is, we are going to hit plus 1.5. We are likely to hit plus 2 degrees Celsius in that sort of gauge of where we were in carbon levels, in atmospheric carbon levels, and where the temperature was at the start of the Industrial Revolution, because that seems to be the marker that people go back to, like 1850. Here's what our carbon levels were. Here's what our average global temperature was. And we are really in a crisis, sort of a feedback loop crisis. And I think a lot of people don't want to talk about it in those terms because they say, oh, well, you know, you're going to put people in a sort of a mindset of despair and it's hopeless and there's nothing we can do. And what I want to do is say we can never not be realistic about what the situation is. And what we've got to do is encourage people that this is, you know, there are elements of despair about this, but really we've got to get together and do everything we can to save the future for our kids. Because even though we here in America are not living the brunt of climate change and global, I mean, I should stop using climate change. I should call it global warming because that's what it is. But millions of people around the world, the poorest nations are suffering those changes right now. The massive flooding that has gone on around the world in places like India and Pakistan, and you know,
Indonesia.
Yeah, Indonesia and Mexico and Guatemala. I mean, we've seen this last year some of the most horrific, and it's getting to Europe. I mean, what's happening in Europe right now is really unprecedented with temperatures also. So they're starting to feel it. But it is always going to hit the poorest, the most marginalized, the least able to mitigate it for themselves, because the wealthy are always going to be able to go hide out in their bunkers. So I think even though there is some cause for despair, I don't deny that, because I sometimes despair myself. I'm also extremely motivated to continue fighting for a better future for my kids, because what we are doing is we are relegating our future generations to really a horrific environment 50 years down the road, 100 years down the road. Whenever that point comes, we are on that pathway right now. And I don't know how people can sort of recognize and know, and maybe some people just put it in the back of their mind because it's too much to deal with. But I will keep speaking about this. We have to do something. We have to do something.
And we're gonna have to address the elephant in the room. And a lot of the major causes of climate change, and the end of the program, when we get to your other issue when it comes to ending the wars, that's a factor there in of itself. Like, if we end all of these wars, which the military industrial complex is a major contributor into climate change.
Sure.
Like, all the carbon that's emitted and all the damaged soil from climate change because of all these forever wars.
Yeah.
It's just unreal.
Well, the U.S. military, if it were a nation unto itself, would be somewhere around the 25th most polluting nation in the world, and that's just our U.S. military. And going back to the COP conferences where people say, "Oh, we'll sign this agreement to do this and that and limit our productions," the military ends up being completely exempt from those kinds of things. You know, in my opinion, the best way to green the military is to reduce it.
Yeah.
You know, reduce its size and stop being the global police force that we want to be. For me, the elephant in the room is capitalism. That's what I think people really don't. We've been so propagandized in this country to think that capitalism is our savior. And so, yeah, historically, we can look at a number of very good things that capitalism has done for us. But what is the baggage that capitalism brings with it? It brings extractionism, exploitation, oppression of indigenous peoples around the world. You know, there are so many things. And even in this country, we have a democracy. It's a pseudo democracy at best, but is, you know, supposedly a democracy. But we suffer from the effects of capitalism because we have a government that is purchased by industry. Well, that's you know, that's what capitalism does. You know, people say, "Oh, well, we shouldn't have monopolies," but that's what every industry wants. They want to eliminate the competition and become a monopoly. We see, you know, and so our antitrust laws aren't enforced because we have representatives that are paid off by industry also. So unless we address the impacts of capitalism, we're going to be very limited in our capacity to solve problems for the future.
Exactly. And to move on to the next part, I also see
Hi,
that
Brandy.
you all, huh?
I said, hi, Brandy.
Hi, Brandy. Hi, Dee. How are y'all? That's one thing I love to do. I love to interact with my audience. And
Yeah,
I
well,
also
do
love
that
how you
'cause
support tuition free college and all that and student loan debt forgiveness. Like, I love that part of your, because it would give an opportunity to so many people who have never gone to college, that have always aspired to go to college and pursue their dreams. Like, I would love to go back to school and take culinary arts courses and become a chef or and all that, because I love cooking. Cooking is my
I do
passion and
too.
all
I
that.
love it too.
And I love how you are for the, what is the, like, enlighten us on what the Thorogood Marshall Plan is.
Where do I have that on my
Yes, you
website?
do.
Thorogood Marshall Plan. I look at Thorogood Marshall as you're going to catch me out with something on my website that I'm not ready to address. Let me get on my website. But let me, while I'm looking that up and seeing what I said about that. Is that on healthcare, or is that
No, it's
on
on tuition free. We're on to the student loan debt forgiveness and tuition free college portion of your
okay.
platform, which I really do love that. And
The
this is something else I really do love, that you are for a minimum paying of teachers.
I was a high school teacher for almost 20 years. I was a high school math teacher. That's what I have 2 degrees in. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in education. I'm no longer in education right now. I left the profession about 6 years ago. I'm glad I got out of it before COVID, because my kids were teenagers at the time and I saw what education was like under COVID. I was glad I had a little bit of extra time to help them out, because education really, really suffered through COVID, and I think we need to recognize that as an impact for the future. But yeah, I mean, teachers are underpaid for the work they do, but there are a ton of people in this country that are underpaid for the actual work they do, and we need to address
Did you
wages across
see,
the board.
talking back to that, did you see what I shared the other day on my Facebook? It was about a teacher. I don't know where she was from, but she was making $42,000 per year. And she got fired because she had an OnlyFans page, and where she was making an additional $8,000 to $10,000 per year.
Yeah, I did actually see that.
If teachers were paid, and this is my belief right now, and this is something that I've held like 5, 6, 7 years ago. I thought the minimum payout should be like 65,000, and that was back then. But now I think it should be a minimum of 70 to 75,000.
Well, even that is barely a living wage in this economy, especially for people who are likely dealing with a lot of student loans. So I found actually the where I got the Thurgood Marshall Plan for public education is actually on Bernie Sanders' website. So I dug it up right now, and I can read some points from it. But it's a progressive plan for education that deals with sort of class and race divisions in schools. And I'll tell you that I've worked in districts where we have had the wealthy schools and the not wealthy schools, and I have seen the difference, like even within a district where the school on this side of the tracks gets everything it needs, and the school on this side of the tracks is falling apart, and it has everything to do with the tax base, and we have to eliminate that for public education. All schools
Exactly. What we need to equalize it and have it equalized across the board, where you have school like what you just said. We need to eliminate the discriminate underfunding of a school over here because you want to overfund school over there because it's in a wealthy area. We need to equalize the funding. Don't do all of this systemic problems that is in our education system, where you have school right over here where you have all the funding in the world, and you have barely any funding, if not no funding at all, in this other school.
We have a lot of funding by through levies, and so education funding often goes to a ballot so that they can fund updates to technology or athletic programs or whatever it is. And so those funding measures are really at the mercy of the voters. And some districts will continually approve them, and some districts will continually deny them. That's the voting public, and that really does fall along sort of whether you're more on the left wing or the right wing in terms of funding education. But in terms of college, let's talk about the impacts to the education system and talk about the impacts to the healthcare system. A lot of people say, well, if we had a Medicare for all system, we don't have the infrastructure to support that. We don't have enough doctors and nurses. Well, let's think about why we don't have enough doctors and nurses, because we're not putting enough people in college to be trained that way, to be trained in healthcare. And the biggest reason that people don't want to go into healthcare is because they know they're going to spend 8 years, sometimes 12 years of your specialist, and they don't want to come out of college with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, which is what medical school often does. And so then you get doctors who want to go into their profession, and they're like, oh, my first priority is to pay off. And I'm not digging on doctors here. I'm just saying, this is an economic reality, is that their focus is on making some money to pay that debt back. Because, well, if we had free college education, imagine how well we would actually be able to staff hospitals and clinics around the country. Not only that, we invest in, Green New Deal building and make sure that we get the hospitals and facilities, particularly in rural areas, built that are going to serve the public. Free college education is a win-win for everybody.
Exactly. And I believe I saw the other day, I don't know if you follow her or not, but Stephanie Kelton put out something where the current student loan debt is like over $2 trillion. And she said that,
wow,
that if we eliminated all student loan debt if we eliminated all student loan debt and made college virtually tuition free, we could add over $2 trillion to the nation's GDP over the next decade.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Can you imagine, like we hear, like what you said, we don't have enough doctors and nurses. We don't have enough teachers. If we had a virtually all tuition-free college, no student loan debt at all, we can fill that void of teachers. We can fill that void with people in the medical profession like doctors, nurses, specialists. And also, we can expand on our LGBTQ healthcare as well as a result.
Yeah, well, and so if you probably the most oppressed people in our current healthcare system are Black women. I mean, that's been studied over and over and over again. So a matter of racial equality, gender equality, just equality and equity in general, and justice in general. We need to have these systems that serve everybody. It's sometimes amazing to me that people look at the United States as some kind of shining example of how you should run a country that serves everybody, when the reality is this country actually serves relatively few people by percentage of its population, and it's all along class lines and race lines.
Have you ever studied, like this was brought to my attention, I think in 2015, 2016, how the Finnish education system is in Finland?
Yep.
That's the kind of educational reforms we need here in the U.S. We need to bring the Finland education style system over here, which their system has been working flawlessly for decades now.
Well, their teachers are very well paid, very well respected by the students in the community. And not only that, they will actually pay you to go to college because they say we need I mean, this is the thing that's mystifying to me. Like, You have a better society. You have more democracy when you have a better educated population. And so the fact that education isn't our top priority, just from that standpoint, is absolutely mystifying to me. So yeah, Finland, they will pay people to go to college. Hey, we need engineers, we need teachers, we need good civil servants who understand how our governmental systems function. Yeah, we're going to pay you to learn about these things so that you can go back into society and be as productive as you possibly can be for the greater good. I mean, these concepts should not be a mystery to people, and yet in this country, it's wild.
That sounds like a federal job guarantee to me.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And this also intertwines with the strengthening labor that is also in your platform. This is all intertwined together. Where
unemployment is used as a tool to oppress working people.
Exactly.
If we do,
like we could fill these voids with a federal job guarantee. We can do away with what they call the Phillips curve, which is NAIRU.
I don't know the Phillips curve. I'll have to look into that.
It's the Phillips curve is what the Federal Reserve uses as a scale of what they want to aim for with unemployment rates.
So, okay, yeah.
But like if we did away with that, aimed for full unemployment, along with Medicare for all, total student loan debt elimination, tuition-free college, and even pay like in my community, and I'm sure there's people in your community as well, like who enjoy fishing and all that. Like they could pay people to go and collect water samples from rivers, lakes, streams, any sort of body of water, and get it to local marine biologists in your state, and still get, while like somebody casting out their line in a pond, lake, stream, river, whatever, and they can be sitting there while they're waiting on a fish to bite. They can be collecting water samples to get to local marine biologists in the area through the universities.
There's no end of need for people to be doing things that will work towards a better future. So
exactly, and that's why like what we're discussing now, to strengthen labor under the federal job guarantee, which is on your platform. And when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, I hit the honey hole here, just like with your platform. And when I saw that, and then I was like looking at everything that intertwines with your platform, like everything on your platform, like Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, and everything that we're discussing to strengthen our labor force and end unemployment and aim for full employment. Like we could be paying people to go be doctors, nurses, school teachers, and you often hear, well, what about the people who are going to be unemployed under Medicare for all? Well, what about it? Well, you have a federal job guarantee that ensures nobody loses their jobs.
Well, what people don't understand is if you transition all of the healthcare administration to the federal government, there are still going to be jobs there. It's probably going to be fewer jobs because you don't have it split up as much, and you don't have all of these insurance companies that you have to go through all these arcane, are we going to cover this? What are the conditions we cover this? What are these plans and those plans? And, there's a million different plans in every different state. And you have one set plan for the entire country. So it's going to reduce a lot of administration, but it doesn't mean that those jobs are all eliminated. And then you have the idea of a just transition. So anybody whose job is eliminated, this goes for the fossil fuel industry. This is one of the big pushbacks for eliminating fossil fuels. Well, what are we going to do with all the workers? Those people have worked in these jobs for decades, and good, we'll find them something to do. It's not an excuse to not eliminate the industry that's literally killing us, So yeah,
look at the state of West Virginia, where Joe Manchin is the U.S. senator, and other states like Kentucky, and all these coal mining states where you have a lot of people who, like, the life expectancies in these states are very low, like extremely low, because of the toxic black lung that they get from the coal. Like, would you rather spend your days in a job that's going to kill you, or would
Yeah.
you rather work a job that's going to give you longevity in life? Like, and
Yeah.
if I were running for president right now as a presidential candidate, I would go to these states, and I'd say, and I would say, and if they ask me, well, what about my job? I'd say, what about it? You're not going to lose your job just because I want to move to a green energy future. You're still going to be in a job where you're not going to have that risk of dying from health related issues like the black lung that's going to develop several years, if not a few decades from now.
And Bernie did exactly that in 2016. He went to McDowell County and Wayne County in West Virginia, where he identified like the lifespan here is like 57 years old. The average lifespan in McDowell County, West Virginia, is 57 years old, where the national average is more like 77. So you're looking at 20 years shorter lifespan, and living that life mostly in complete poverty. So Bernie, regardless of what people's opinions are about Bernie right now, 8 years ago when he started that movement, that's what we were behind. We were behind this whole transformation of, like, Bernie's ideas from 2016 are still alive and well in candidates like me. But I want to go beyond. I think
We need to
go beyond. But
like,
that was the genesis right there.
We need to go farther beyond, like with the healthcare discussion, and this goes along with strengthening labor under the job guarantee, and the people that work in administration and marketing, they're not going to lose their jobs just because of it being publicly owned and operated. They're not going to lose their jobs at all. They're going to be transitioned to, like, what if a few of the people that work in administration and marketing are very talented artists? Like, what if they love art? Like, that's good and all that put them beautifying and pretty much improving their communities, because I'm sure there's people that work in administration, the people that work in marketing who love art, who love painting. Like, they can go around painting murals across their whole city and beautifying their communities.
Well, and also you mentioned, industries transitioning to public ownership, which is something that, I support for a lot of industries. I think our rail industry needs to be public. I think our pharmaceutical industry needs to be publicly owned. I think the fossil fuel industry needs to be publicly owned. Public ownership of industry sectors comes with unionization. I can't think of a public sector right now that doesn't have a strong union. I was in education for almost 20 years. We had the largest and strongest union in the entire state, and I imagine that's the same for teachers unions pretty much all over the country. So
except for and we also need to abolish like Brandy. She's in our audience. She's a fellow Red Beret, and myself. We live in what they call right to work states, where they are. Like, we need to abolish those laws.
Abolish right to work. Absolutely. Yeah. No, absolutely. No question about it. Right to work should be abolished through federal legislation. There's no question about
it. And that would greatly strengthen labor in the states where the right to work laws are rampant and all that. Like, right to work, I've looked it up, and I was talking with Joe Firestone one night, and all of that started back in like the 40s and 50s, and that's according to Ballotpedia. And if we went to a federal job guarantee and abolishment of the right to work laws, then we have a very strong workforce as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's you'd mentioned the Phillips curve, and I know that the Reserve has these policies of an appropriate level of unemployment. I didn't know that it was called the Phillips curve, so I'm going to look into that. Thank you for that.
That's the scale that they go for.
The fact that exists, that there is an acceptable level of unemployment, is very confusing to me, because in my mind, the acceptable level of unemployment is zero. Right?
Exactly.
Everybody who wants to work and is capable of work, and I want to make sure that we recognize that many in the disability community are not able to work, and we need to make sure that they have the sustained income. Also, I mean, the fact that you're disabled should not be cause for you to live a less than average life economically. But the reality is that people who are capable of work, by and large, want to work. This idea that people don't want to work is absolute garbage. People want to work. People want to contribute. People want to work towards making their communities better. But what people don't want to do is work 3 jobs, 80 hours a week, and still not be able to make rent. That's what people don't want to do. And the way out of that is a jobs guarantee, better education, and better health care, and guaranteed housing.
What is your opinion? And I just want to ask you this. What is your opinion on moving away from a minimum wage system to a living wage system where it is adjusted on the area you live on and the average cost of living? Like, I've often wanted to get this out of a candidate. Like, what is their opinion on doing that kind of system?
I mean, so I think that there is some merit to looking at the cost of living in a given area, because I have advocated for a 25, and sometimes I think realistically, when you go back to inflation and productivity, a lot of people leave out productivity in the calculations. That Americans are very, very productive, and what that means is, because we're not getting that return in our wages, that is simply going straight into CEO and shareholder pockets. That depending upon where you are, $25 should be a baseline standard, right? And then in some areas, you can't make it without $30 an hour in order to make rent and pay your bills.
Where I live in rural Georgia, and $25 an hour on average, like that's $1,000 every week. That's like 4,000, 4,500 on average per month. That would sustain somebody very well, like really decent in a rural community like where I live at here in South Georgia. But then you have to take into the factor of, well, what's the cost of living in major urban areas like Seattle, LA, Atlanta, and New York City?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got to do something about property values. There's another thing with capitalism here, is that property values in these urban areas have shot through the roof. In my job, I'm a commercial building inspector. I inspect buildings for an insurance company for safety, to make sure that they got the right fire protections and that kind of thing. So I'm basically a building and business safety inspector for an insurance company. Don't hate me because I work for an insurance company. It's actually the good part.
I hate you. Just kidding.
I know. I would never work for a health insurance company, but this is actually the reality is insurance companies are in business to make money. And if you're insuring property, you want that property to be safe. You want it to be well protected, and that's going to help the business and the residents, or the whatever the occupants are. So I don't have a hard time with that. I think I'm doing, at least something that is not terrible within the insurance community.
Hang on just a moment. I have to step out the room for just a second.
All right. So I guess I'll wait for Greg to come back, or I'm not talking to anybody. Hi out there in the audience. I hope you're doing well. Maybe a dog barking. I know I have to get up and bring my dog in sometimes. She barks at the neighbors. Yeah, I mean, health insurance is a completely different thing. The health for-profit health insurance is a broken model. It was always going to be a broken model. You know, the fact that you know, it's something that everybody needs. Everybody needs to go see the doctor.
I'm back.
You know, if you're putting a cost to that, if you're putting whether you get treatment in the hands of somebody who is going to ultimately seek to make a dollar off it, you're not going to get the treatment that you need. You know, and that's the you know, it's a health insurance is an exclusionary interest. They want to keep the good and they want to reject the bad, and so all the people who really need treatment, they get left out in the dirt, in the cold, and all the people who are good health risks where the insurance companies are not going to have to pay out as much. Oh, sure, we'll insure you. You know, we may have to pay out here and there for this or that, but in general, we're going to be making money off of you, where we're not going to be making money off the unhealthy people, and so they can, you know, they can take a hike, and that's really what the massive problem is with for-profit health insurance. You know,
Yeah, the for-profit health insurance industry as a whole just needs to go, and we
yep.
need to pass Medicare for all, nationalize every single aspect under the sun when it comes to healthcare. We need to nationalize our public transit system, our rail.
And I think a lot of people don't know this, and I try and reference this as much as possible. But about 2 years ago, there was a study done by the Lancet Journal, LANCET. They're a respected medical journal. And they studied the United Kingdom's National Health Service privatization efforts from 2013 to 2020. And what they found was there was a definitive correlation between increased privatization of services, that is somebody now making money off of your healthcare services, and increased preventable mortality. Like the more you privatize healthcare, the more people are going to die who don't need to. Preventable mortality. And I think if more people knew that link existed, that there wouldn't be a question we would have a Medicare for all system, because people would demand
that. The privatization of the UK's NHS, and I'm a very big supporter of a national health service. It all started under Prime Minister David Cameron when he was elected. In like this started like back in, is like what you said, in 2013 when he was the prime minister, and that's when the National Health Service over there has went downhill and all that.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and I don't want to, you know, because there is a difference between you know, conservative ideology, like neocon type of ideology, hard conservative ideology, and neoliberal ideology. But in the end, they all lead to the same place. People aren't getting the services they need, and Democrats will often use this as an excuse. Well, you should vote for us because we're not as bad. Like, yeah, but you're still bad. You know,
yeah, exactly.
What we want is good. You know, so I'm going to reject anybody who says, "Oh, look, we're not as bad." No, not as bad is still bad, and we're at a point where we got to fight for good.
Yeah, and always voting for the lesser evil always paves the way to the greater evil, and we've seen that from Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, who was even worse than Bill Clinton. Then you got Biden, who was horrible, the most worst president in U.S. history, and all that.
Well, that really is, I've said this often, that the three Democratic presidents that we've had I should say post Reagan, because a lot of this garbage that we have really started with Ronald Reagan's administration. But you know, Clinton, Obama, Biden, all three of them are objectively more conservative than Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was a horrible president for the time. You know, I mean, he was a crook. He kept us in Vietnam. But in terms of like ideology, and he was, he basically wasn't a great guy. I mean, I think everybody knew him, said he was an asshole. But but the reality is, the Democrats that we have had post 1980, post Reagan, have been more conservative in their own ideology. Obama said it himself. Yeah, if I 20 years ago, I would have been considered a moderate Republican.
Yeah, he would have been like Ricky Dick back in those days.
Yeah. So the Democratic Party has shifted to the right. Even though people say, "Oh, this is people look at Joe Biden and say most progressive administration ever," and I'm like, "Did you forget about FDR?" And for as many problems as FDR may have had, I mean, with getting us into war, maybe World War II was the last justifiable war because we were actually fighting the Nazis, but that FDR did a huge amount for the labor movement in this country. And it's amazing to me that we have people looking at Joe Biden who shut down the potential railroad strike a year ago when they were striking for exactly the same things that caused the disaster in East Palestine, Ohio, which, by the way, has still not been cleaned up. And those residents still not have had what we would consider environmental or economic justice through the malfeasance of Norfolk Southern. Railroad, and Norfolk Southern is a railroad company that contributes actually more to Democrats than they do to Republicans.
They even contribute. They like weeks before that, the CEO of Norfolk Southern was with the Department of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah, well, they're really all joined at the. Buttigieg is a disaster as a transportation secretary. I can't believe that people are still thinking like if Biden should drop out, that they're thinking Pete Buttigieg would be a reasonable person to step in as the Democrat.
He would be even further to the right of like
absolute
Pete
disaster.
Is nothing more than a rainbow version of Trump.
Yeah. I don't want to compare to Trump. And I say this, the worst thing about Trump is that he is somebody who emboldens white supremacists. I mean, what we see going on with the white supremacist movement in this country, where people, I mean, there's a mayoral candidate in Tennessee, in Franklin, Tennessee, which is a little bit southwest of Nashville, who is openly supported by Nazis, neo-Nazis who are out in public giving Nazi salutes, and she's not denouncing them, So that's where we are in this country. And a candidate like Trump, as much of a charlatan as he is and as much of a fraud as he is, the very worst thing about him is that he emboldens the white supremacists.
What we need,
that is very dangerous.
What we need as leftists is we need somebody like with the temperament of Trump as a leftist candidate that's actually for the greater good, and that, my friend, is you.
Yeah, I was going to say, look no further, because I've been told, I've been told that and honestly, civility politics, right? Civility politics, like don't make people feel uncomfortable, don't embarrass people in public. I'm not about that. Like, if you're doing wrong, I'm going to yell at you for doing wrong. If you're passing crappy legislation, and so I have a lot of the moderates in my district, like, oh, well, your behavior is Trump-like. And I'm like, I am saying the things that I believe, and I'm saying them without,
you see things,
maybe.
You see things like through the lens of your neighbor who is struggling, and the person up the street that's struggling, and everybody around you who is struggling. You have to be that voice for the ones who are struggling, that is dealing with pain and anguish of a system that has thrown them over the bus. And that's why we need people like you who are calling out the big money. And that's why I like what you did on your website, where you have Rick's receipts. And I love that you did that. I love how you came packing receipts, because that is, as somebody who is with the Dump the Corruption movement and one of the forefathers of that, but I love how you're calling a spade for a spade and for what it really is. And that's what we need. We need somebody that is going to
Unless
But
you have people doing that, then the general public doesn't know, because the general
no,
public that is not as invested in political movement and activism, and they're going to work and they're 9 to 5ers, or sometimes they're like I said, working 80 hours a week. A lot of times they don't have time to pay attention to, they're involved with their families, whatever it is. And I really try not to judge. I'm somebody who got involved in activism at a very young age. I was protesting war when I was 19 years old as a freshman in college. And so I've been doing this activism and being involved in politics for 35 years. And I don't necessarily have that expectation of everybody else. But what I do want people to understand is that if I am not out there and boldly telling the truth as I see it, then those things don't get voice at all, because you're not going to get moderate Democrats criticizing Democratic politicians. And that's a lot of the criticisms that I got when I ran because I ran as a Democrat in the 2 prior cycles. And running as a Green now. And that's a lot of the criticism that I got was like, why are you going after Rick Larsen so hard? He's not that bad. And I was like, receipts. He is actually that bad. And unless you have people being willing and to unabashedly just say those things, then people don't know. I'll go anywhere and I'll say, and I have people tell me, well, you're going to turn off voters because you're criticizing the Democratic Party. And I'm like, if I turn people off, then I turn people off. But I'm going to get out there. I'm going to tell the truth. And hopefully it's going to resonate with people that we can do better.
yeah, that's what I love. Like, we need people like you, who are for dumping the corruption, who bring the receipts of the horrible things that these representatives do, like in terms of legislation that is hurting people in our own communities. And also the fact that they are taking the big money, and somebody like you, who I see on a routine basis, that is calling him out for all this amounts of PAC money, the super PAC money that's even in your receipts. And I love that. Like, we need more candidates who are vocally passionate about that, so that way we can raise awareness to just how horrible of people that are our own elected representatives are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if I can just sort of talk about my own race here, Rick Larsen is, in my opinion, one of the worst Democrats in Congress, as we discussed before the show started. The American Conservative Union, they're the people who hold CPAC every year. That's the premier, they call themselves the premier conservative organization in the country. So they host all the presidential candidates and speakers at their convention. They host essentially the GOP convention. They have a ranking system for sitting House representatives, and you can go in and you can see how these representatives align with what their priorities are. So the American Conservative Union doesn't take a position on every piece of legislation, but the pieces of legislation that are important to them, Rick Larsen aligns with them more than 85% of other Democrats. And that's just on the books. This is the way he's voted. Does that mean he votes with the Republicans all the time? No, he doesn't. But, but what it does mean is that when there's a group of Democrats that splits with maybe the majority of the Democratic Party to vote with Republicans to pass some heinous piece of legislation, whether it's like deregulation of the banking industry, for instance, whether it's the Bankruptcy Act that Joe Biden, 2005 Bankruptcy Act that Joe Biden supported in 2005, that took student loan debt off the table for bankruptcy. Those pieces of legislation that are extremely pro-business and anti-worker, you will find him voting with that split group of Democrats when it's like a partisan piece of legislation to help Republicans pass stuff. So people say, oh, he's a good Democrat. He's not even a good Democrat. I'm not a supporter of the Democratic Party, but I don't think that everybody in the Democratic Party is completely terrible, but he's completely terrible. I mean, that's
and it's like the people like that. Like, I'm sure you've seen the graphic going around, or the meme that explains the political ratchet effect
absolutely
that we do have in our country. And people like Rick Larsen are a prime example of that, like where Democrats like him will block political movement to the left, such as Medicare for All bill, for instance. Like
Well,
they would block that bill, and then everything gets shifted to the right. And then at the end of the day, the Democrats want to cry in their little cornflakes because they want to sit there and blame people for not voting for them. Well, hello, this should be your wake-up call to maybe shift to the left and adopt leftist policies.
Trump winning in 2016 should have been enough of a wake-up call. I mean, really, really, honestly, the Democrats losing to, you know, I like to call him a carnival barker. I mean, the dude is a carnival barker. He's a charlatan. He speaks at a fourth grade level to his audience, but he knows how to motivate them. When I watch Donald Trump speak to his audience, I understand how he is speaking to them and how he is captivating them. He doesn't have to get real deep, but he has to just like nail the Democrats for being a corrupt institution. And he's not wrong. That's the problem, is he's not wrong. So 2016 should have been a wake-up call for the Democrats to really do some soul searching about what they stand for and who they stand for, because it was 8 years of Obama shitting on the working class. I don't know if we're allowed to cuss here. Pardon my French.
It's okay.
Anyway, you know, it was 8 years of Obama shitting on the working class and bombing countries around the world that led to Trump winning. And the Democrats did not do any kind of introspection on that whatsoever. They never did. And they said, oh, it was misogyny about Hillary Clinton. I'm not denying that there was some misogyny there. I'm sure there was some misogyny involved.
She was a horrible candidate. But she was. We need to get over this identity politics in our country. Like, and actually, if we abandoned identity politics and went to strictly policy-based thinking and policy-based voting, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender, their sexual orientation, gender identity, and so forth. If they have policies that's actually going to improve the lives of our communities, then that's good. We need to get over this identity politics like what we saw in 2020, which really showed how horrible the Democratic Party is. Of course, the Republicans are guilty of it now because they're doing it now. Like, both parties are equally as corrupt as the other.
It's true. And, you know, and I try, you know, this is one of the things that I got criticized, because when I ran as a Democrat, I went through a whole bunch of endorsement processes for local Democratic parties. And I had my local county Democratic Party end up not endorsing me. And when in their interview, they were like, well, what made, and it was mostly women. I'm just going to say it was mostly women. And they were like, well, Rick Larson stands for women's rights. You know, what makes you think that you're going to be better on women's rights than Rick Larson? And I don't really feel comfortable with you challenging somebody who's been good on women's rights. And I say, if you don't think that I would be more of a champion for women's rights, but let me tell you something, because if you want to play identity politics like this, let me tell you about Rick Larson. In 2013 and 2015, when the Windsor and Obergefell cases were going in front of the Supreme Court, and that was the repealing the Defense of Marriage Act, and that was the Marriage Equality Act. Majority of Democrats wrote an amicus brief to the Supreme Court that says, please support these cases in support of the LGBTQ community, like overturn DOMA and we support marriage equality. Rick Larson was one of a handful, again, this handful, one of fewer than 30 Democrats that failed to sign on to either of those briefs. So don't tell me about identity politics with Rick Larson, because Rick Larson does not give a shit. He really doesn't.
Yeah, I'm looking up him right now. Like, he has like some of the most anti-woman. Like, I'm even looking where he is an anti-abortion Democrat, just like Henry Cuellar.
He's not. Where's that coming from? No, I got to be truthful about it. He's not anti-abortion. He supports a women's right to choose. But I also support women's right to choose. Where Rick Larson's anti-women is that he doesn't support Medicare for all, that would make sure all women are covered. So don't talk to me about anti-women if you're not talking about making sure everybody is guaranteed health care, because the people who suffer
while we're on this discussion about
women, and in particular Black women.
While we're on this discussion, and this is really good, what is your opinion on overturning the Hyde Amendment, which prevents federal funding for funding abortions?
Well, Medicare for all codifies overturning the Hyde Amendment. Medicare for All guarantees abortion rights. So yeah, if we pass Medicare for All, the Hyde Amendment being overturned is part of it. So I 100% support overturning the Hyde Amendment.
And it would, and I've also looked like at a recent Medicare for All bill and some in the past that were like even the one that Mike Gravel supported back when he was in the Senate. Like he was a champion for women's rights back in the 80s.
Yeah, for sure.
And he even called Joe Biden out as a senator. I watched a video. Like when he was in the Senate, he called Joe Biden out. Like he was even more hardcore and vicious as a senator than Bernie Sanders ever thought about being.
Oh yeah, Gravel was in a different league than Bernie. You know, Bernie, Bernie has become frustrating to a lot of people on the left because they look at him as a sheepdog, and they look at him as not upholding the policies that he said. So I have, my opinion of Bernie is. I'm frustrated that he did not continue the fight and that he has come out and endorsed Joe Biden. It's a real, strike against, in my opinion. But Bernie
rubbed me the wrong way.
Bernie was never a call out an individual. He's never been that. I mean, Bernie has gone hard after corporations. Bernie is the only person that I can think of who has actually done a real filibuster where he stood on the floor of the House for 8-10 hours and railed against anti-worker policies. And I don't even remember what the purpose of that was for, although I think it had something to do. I think it was the healthcare issue. But Bernie has kind of quietly made a lot of bad legislation better, and he has not put his name on it. So I can appreciate Bernie for where we are right now in terms of a more galvanized movement on the left. I don't think the left would be, as fractured as the left is, I think we're in a better place because of Bernie. But I also think that our moment now is beyond Bernie. Bernie is the past. We got to think about what is the future.
Exactly. And I love your foreign policy stances right here, where you're for reducing our military bases around the world. And I also love, and this goes along with what happened in Palestine tonight, or the last 48 hours, ending all foreign aid to the Israeli government because of how they treat the Palestinian people. I really, really do love that.
Well, if you haven't seen, the response to the Hamas attack on Israeli citizens has been, as it always is, wildly disproportionate. They started rocketing apartment buildings. I think close to 200 people have been killed. The Israeli forces are absolutely indiscriminate when it comes to targeting Palestinians. They'll target journalists. I forget her name, Shireen, the woman journalist who was killed. I think it was over a year ago now, where there's no doubt that they just targeted her. They knew she was a journalist. They targeted her. The expansion of Israeli settlements where they bulldoze Palestinians out of their homes. All of this is unconscionable, not to mention the fact that Gaza is the world's largest open-air prison. It's blockaded. They have no electricity or medical treatment or clean water. And when you cage people like that, you cannot expect that they are not going to fight back, because the situation for Palestinians is so dire right now. Of course they're going to fight back.
Yeah, earlier, before you and I started our interview, I was live over with Around the World with Dee and friends, discussing the situation there and all that. But yeah, it's just crazy. And I see something right here that says eliminating the disturbing and environment. What is the Growler planes?
Okay, that is actually something that is local to my district. We have these jets. They're EA-18 fighter jets. They're like electronic surveillance fighter jets, and they are West Coast based. They're basically a modified version of the FA-18 Hornet. And they are the majority of the fleet. I think maybe all the fleet is based right here in my district on Whidbey Island. And these jets burn somewhere in the neighborhood of 44,000 gallons of fuel an hour, and they are flying morning, noon, and night over populated areas. And so I'm involved with what's called the Sound Defense Alliance, where basically we want to get these jets out of populated areas.
I have never understood why they want to position these military aircraft, especially near suburban areas and heavily populated areas. Like that is one thing I could never in my life understand why they did it the way they do.
The volume of these jets, and there are other jets that are just as loud, and so I grew up in an Air Force family, and so I've been around Air Force bases my entire life. But the volume of these jets over populated areas approaches 130 decibels. Well, if you have sustained exposure to 85 decibels or more, you're going to get hearing loss over time. And so what we have these jets flying morning, noon, and night over populated areas, over schools. And
that's even more terrifying there.
Disturbing the marine environment, and I had a friend send me a video where he lives 2 miles from one of the runways. And he measured the sound inside his house at 90 decibels. So that's really what this is, what the Growler program is about, is like this entire fleet of 112 or so of these jets are housed right here in my district and are just a disturbance.
Like to put a military installment like that close to an urban area is just beside me. Like I cannot understand why they would put, especially where you've got children in schools, like that should not be allowed. Like they need to be limited as to where they can fly and all that. Like over a school, no.
Well, and
you have children.
It just contributes. It's just another branch of the U.S. military that has unaccountable levels of pollution, and is detrimental to the local population, detrimental to the environment. So there's a strong movement in this district to have those jets move somewhere else. And my preference would be that we just scale back the military in general, rather than shift our problem into some other location. But if we can't scale that down, at least get them away from populated areas.
Yeah, exactly. Like what we also need to do is we need to close the bases abroad, bring all that hardware and equipment and everything over here, and sell those bases off. Like just sell them to the countries that they're in, because they would already be military bases.
We don't even need to sell them. Just leave them. Just give them. We don't need to sell them. We don't need that money.
We don't.
Just walk away from it. Let's leave people alone.
Leave people alone. Like, and this also, like, I saw something here recently, and it, like, where there has, like, in the northern part of the Philippines, where has been heavy aircraft, heavy military going on in that part of the South China Sea, which could provoke China, which we don't need. We need to not provoke China or Russia, because we don't want nuclear powers. Like, and what I think about nuclear war is we need to have, like, what Jeremy Corbyn called on in his 2017 and 2019 Labor Party manifesto that he ran on. He wanted a global nuclear disarmament treaty signed.
And I'm 100% in support of that. And unfortunately, the global nuclear disarmament movement, which was pretty strong in the 60s and 70s, has really, really dissipated in the last few decades. And we do need to revive it. It is, I would say it's the biggest concern for me in terms of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, is the fact that this could very well lead to nuclear war. And I think we have to be realistic. Like, it's game over for the human race if we start getting into nuclear conflict. And and the other thing is, with the military bases, we're the only country that has hundreds of bases around the world. We have bases in proximity to China. We have bases in proximity to Russia. We have bases all over Africa. We have bases in South America. I mean, it's, we are the empire right now. That is,
I
it's so
think
many.
we are the empire, and right now, like the U.S. empire, pretty much in a way succeeded the British Empire. Like,
Sure.
we've become the successor to the British Empire.
Yeah, I'd agree
And
with that.
we and what we are witnessing right now is the fall of the Western Empire, just like the Roman Empire. Like, the old saying is, like, they're too big for their britches.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Well,
you've heard
exactly
that
what happened.
saying countless times from your parents. Like, they've got, like, we've gotten way too big for our britches, and we are on a crash course to fall, just like the Roman Empire did.
Well, and it's a lot of it is going to be driven by climate change and the fact that we have massive economic destitution within our own country. So, yeah, I think absolutely we need to rein things in. We need to leave, and that's not isolationist. People are like, oh, you want to be an isolationist? I don't want to be an isolationist. I have no problem with fair trade around the world. I have no problem with global cooperation. But the way we do things right now is not cooperation.
It's not working.
It's dominance.
When
It's not working
right now, especially in a time where we need to be scaling back military presence abroad. Like, hell, if we even decided to keep the military bases there as a country, we can use those military bases to ship to, like, poor countries, like developing countries. Like, we talk about a global Green New Deal. Why not use those bases as a staging ground for solar panels and renewable energy?
There's a lot of ideas out there of what they could be used for, but the reality is we do not have a government that is in the mindset. And again, going back to the guy that I'm challenging, Rick Larson, he has been on House Armed Services since he started his career. He is in support of increasing military budgets. I will tell you that he voted against. They tried to add a supplement to the military budget. It was something like $25-35 billion. They wanted to add a supplement. It passed anyway in the committee. He voted against it in committee. The only reason he voted against it in committee, give you three guesses, the first two don't count, is because I was challenging him and calling him out on it. and there's no doubt about it, because he's taken some heat because of my candidacy, because I am identifying the things where he is not serving the district. And we do have a progressive district. I mean, we have, sort of technically a progressive district, and and so there are a lot of people that are in opposition to his him being our representative here. And I really have given them sort of fuel to their fire. And so I'll give you another example of where my candidacy has pushed him. I told you I was a cannabis activist, and I was part of getting cannabis legal here in Washington State. Well, up until 2020, he had voted at least 4 times to allow the Department of Justice to continue prosecuting cannabis offenses, even in states where it was already legal, continuing to allow the federal government to prosecute for cannabis offenses in states where. So he voted for that 4 times. I called him out on it everywhere I could go. Well, now he supports the MORE Act to legalize cannabis federally. He would not be there if it wasn't for me with my, foot on his ass saying, this is where this guy is terrible. So
That's what we need. We
there
need
is
people.
value. There is value to running a progressive campaign, a strong progressive campaign, in order to push people to the left. Rick Larson will never be pushed left. He's going to do a few performative things. He's going to vote against a military budget that he knows is going to pass anyway, so he can come back to the district and say, hey, look, I voted against this thing. That's all right, Rick. We know exactly where you stand. It's not going to fly. I don't want to push him left. I want to take his seat away from him.
And that's what we need. We need candidates like you who are more than willing to hold the current office holders accountable for their actions while they're in Congress, or even on the local level and the state level. And I have said this time and time again, even if a green is not, even if certain states do not have ballot access for the Greens, run anyways, even as an independent candidate.
Sure.
Run anyways, even if you have to run as an independent candidate. And I love your campaign and everything about it. And Brandy Weaver, our fellow Red Beret, wanted me to ask you a question on where you stood on disability reform. Like, where do you stand on that?
Well, Brandy, if you go to my website, you can see where I am on disability issues. I've got I am for access. I am for making sure, one of the biggest things you could do for disability is have Medicare for all, because not being able to access a doctor is certainly more impactful for people with disabilities. I'm in support of disability rights and access. I take my cues from the disability community in terms of what they need. I'm the kind of person who's like, I'm not gonna say what I think people need in their lives if I'm not living that experience. I am gonna go to those communities and I am gonna say, you tell me what you want me to fight for. And if you look at my disability platform, you'll see that is actually a disability platform that was created by disability justice activists. So
I love that about you, because you're the kind of guy who is not going to talk at people, but you're just going to sit back, listen to their concerns, take it to heart, and run with that, and see where your competition, like the Democrat and the Republican, are falling short. Like, actually listen to the needs of those communities, so that way you can learn from what they are dealing with, so that way you can add it to your platform. Like, I hear this a lot from disability activist groups, where they want candidates who are more in lockstep with ending the means testing as well.
Yeah,
for disability.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, one of the best things that I ever did to kind of get myself in a disability justice mind frame is I was invited down. I was invited down to Portland, and Portland, Oregon is about 200 miles south of me. And I have a friend who also ran for Congress in 2020. Her name is Amanda Seeby. And she said, we're going to do a Roll for Our Rights event. And so it was a gathering in a park where we were doing a protest for disability justice. And what I did is I rolled around Portland in a wheelchair, and I never used a wheelchair before. And I got to learn exactly how difficult it is just to access the things that those of us who are, have the use of our legs and are able-bodied, just basically going to the store and going to the bathroom and trying to use public transit and getting around on our seats. Unless you are actually sitting in that wheelchair and rolling yourself around and seeing how physically difficult and where all that access is limited, you really don't know. I mean, you have to get in there and experience it. It was a fantastic, really transformed my understanding of what disability justice was all about. And so again, I'm going to take my cues from people who say this is what we need to have full access, and then I'm going to fight for it.
Yeah, and in terms of housing for disability, people with disability and people who are on SSI, and the people that have the handicaps like that are wheelchair bound, I think those who do live in public housing, I think the public housing does need to be designed with people with disabilities in mind.
Oh,
So that
absolutely.
way,
No question. No question.
so that way they do not run the risk of getting injured. And I also, those pull cords that you see in a hospital,
Mm-hmm.
I think also having one of them in the home where they can reach it is what. And when you pull that thing, it notifies public, like an ambulance, and they'll come out to you. And that's where Medicare for All, like, even take the ambulatory services and nationalize that.
Well, absolutely. Ambulance services should be a given. You've got to get people transported to hospitals, and they cannot come away from that with a $2,000, $3,000 ambulance ride bill. Absolutely criminal. Absolutely criminal.
I live in a state right now, and this is
Thanks,
in the
Randy.
state of Georgia. Like, I live in Georgia. Almost a dozen of our counties do not have a hospital. 6 counties do not have ambulatory services, so they're having to use ambulatory services from adjacent counties. And there are like 3 or 4 counties that do not have any doctor's offices. Like out in those 3 or 4 counties, they're having to rely on telehealth services to communicate with their doctors. Like, there are.
Well, yeah, telehealth is not a bad thing. In fact, we need to expand telehealth. But if that's all you're relying on for your services, that's going to be a problem. It has to be telehealth plus access to actual facilities. So that's kind of stunning to me that that it's, I shouldn't say that it's stunning. I mean I know these things, like, intellectually I know these things, but you hear it and you go, God, that's terrible.
Like, in 2020, I realized we did go blue on the presidential level and blue on the Senate level for the first time in decades here in Georgia.
Right.
But on the other hand, on the state side, we have a Republican governor. We have a Republican-controlled House and Senate in the state of Georgia.
Yeah.
And all of those Republicans voted against Medicaid expansion. And that's another reason why I support a Medicare for All system, because I see the overwhelming incompetence from many states that are not capable of handling the healthcare systems of their own states. Like, Medicaid services are not being handled properly.
Yeah.
Like, why is somebody like a Cornel West not going to these states and talking with state governors and holding meetings with them, the governors, saying, why don't y'all support a Medicare for All system so you don't have to worry about that? Like,
well, because they're, I mean, here's the thing: is we have been so propagandized. We have been so propagandized in this country for the last, since World War II, since, like, the threat of communism, since the Cold War. We have been so propagandized to think that anything that is slightly, socialistic is evil. I mean, some of these people ideologically hear the word socialism and they're like, I gotta fight that. Socialism is evil. Socialism is bad. I gotta fight that. They have been ideologically trained to hate socialism. What is, what gives me
I used to be guilty of that. Like, I used to be, like, pre-2015, from like 2009, when I was like 18 years old at the time, till like early 2015, when I discovered Bernie Sanders as well. Like, I was propagandized to believe and hate socialism.
I grew up in a Republican household. My father was Air Force. He was a Reagan Republican. He hated Democrats. And just sort of ideologically, it was a very red blue thing. It was, I'm a Republican, and so therefore I hate Democrats. Without and then my dad is very much on the libertarian side of things.
I used to be a libertarian as well,
and that I open about it. My dad's a racist. I grew up in a racist household, and he didn't want to pay taxes. And I grew up, I remember the 1988 election when it was Michael Dukakis, and they ran the Willie Horton ads and the welfare queen ads. And, they harp on these like, oh, those people over there, they're taking your hard-earned tax money. And that is my dad's mindset on things. I don't want to pay taxes. I don't want to pay taxes for other people. I don't care. It's not my responsibility for my tax. I mean, it's a whole anti-society mindset. Like, what is the reason that human society formed? It was so that we could better take care of each other and survive into the future and make sure our children had a better existence. And some people on an ideological level, they don't believe that. And those people really fall into the Republican Party mindset. Democrats, now I'm not talking about Democrats like leadership, like people who align with the Democratic Party. I don't feel like it's a different type of person. I don't feel like they are anti-society, but what they don't realize is the Democratic Party is actually a con job, because the things that, they're Rick Larson, he's not that bad. At least he's blue and he's gonna support women's rights. But I have to go to them and say, you got to read between the lines, because on a deeper level that you're not paying attention to, he opposes a lot of the things that you support. And I think that's the Democrats Republicans are open about who they are, and they will attract the people who are, have a racist, I don't want to say all Republicans, one of the things that Bill Maher said is like, if you're a Republican, you're not necessarily a racist, but if you're a racist, you definitely have a home in the Republican Party. So there's an attraction to that kind of thing, and very pro-military and very like American dominance. I think Democrats are a little bit different, but they are heavily conned by Democratic Party leadership.
Like,
the Democratic
Party
to work in that same money.
Like, I tried to work in my state's Democratic Party, and I have seen like Democrats who are a bit racist.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I have seen Democrats who are extremely transphobic to the point to where they will start sounding like Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yep. Yep. It's true.
And I literally told this Democrat, and this is a Democrat who is an administrator of the Georgia Democrats Facebook group. I told him, I said, for a Democrat, you sure do sound an awful lot like Marjorie Taylor Greene with your QAnon level conspiracies on transgender issues that you seriously do not understand anything about, like, and all that. And I love all of your LGBTQ points on your platform, which I really do. Like, I'm LGBTQ as well, so, and I love how you support all of that, and like and I love how you have like transgender equality, where you're actually a fighter for trans rights, like, and all that. And that's what you also included in your Medicare for All bill. And for the trans men, women, and youth, I do think Medicare for All should cover, like, for their hormone therapy and bottom surgeries.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And Medicare for All, and all these trans healthcare bans. And the more I've sat here watching all these trans healthcare bans across the country, especially across here in the Deep South, I have seen the dire need for having a national Medicare for All system. I was like, look, you see all these bills that are passing that are anti-trans. Don't you realize that a national Medicare for all system would actually, if we had Medicare for all 10 years ago, none of this would be happening.
It's true. It's true. Well, in terms of gender affirming care, all you need to say to me, this is my baseline position. Gender affirming care saves lives. That's it. That's all I need to know. The studies
prevents. And there's no telling how many of our youth who are trans commit suicide because they don't have the love and the support.
Yep, it's true. And I have going back to my career as a high school teacher, obviously I met everybody in the general public. The general public comes through your classroom, and so I have known trans youth who were going through that transition. And as a teacher, I was always I kind of didn't understand it at first when I first had a person who was born as a boy but was transitioning to being a woman. It was really my kind of first experience, and I was a little confused at first, but you have a conversation and he says, listen, she said, I want to be called this. And I was like, okay, I got to remember, and, because that's not your name on my books and in the, but I'm supportive of what you need to be comfortable and safe in my classroom, and I will support that. So,
you provided them with a loving, safe space that they can freely be themselves. And I think, and with the attack on teachers, it's just and that's another reason why we have a teacher shortage too, because of the egregious attacks that continue to happen on our educators across this country.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of there is a lot of places in our country where Medicare for all is needed. Like, let's talk about Roe v. Wade. Medicare for, if like all these liberal women who want to sit there and say, oh, we need Roe v. Wade, we need if you would support somebody that actually supports Medicare for all against somebody who doesn't, then
that is the weirdest thing about Medicare for all and people who don't support Medicare for all, but they do want abortion rights. And I'm like, it's part of the package, people,
Like if you support abortion rights, Medicare for all. Gender affirming care, Medicare for all. Dental, hearing, vision, every single thing, even mental health.
Yeah, mental health, hospice care, end of life care, and getting those clinics and services out to rural areas that really suffer from lack.
Yeah, you did not know until tonight just how bad a healthcare system was in our rural communities.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know how bad it is up here in Washington, and it's not, I don't want to say I don't know how bad it is. It's just every time you hear it, it's like it hits you again. Like, how can it possibly be this bad? It's like a punch to the face. That's like, yeah, I know it's bad, but wow, I'm hearing how bad it is again. That's kind of my reaction to it. Like,
yeah, and you and me as a red beret and somebody who is a very staunch supporter of Medicare for all. Medicare for all, and along with the nationalization of our pharmaceutical industry, our hospitals, a federal job guarantee, you could take a lot of people who are out of work in construction right now and put them to building new hospitals in every single rural community across this country. They can build doctors' offices, specialist clinics, and everything under the sun. They can even be building brand new pharmacies.
There are so many jobs programs we could implement that would build a better future for this country, with education, with healthcare, with construction of new housing, public housing, and with construction of new transportation systems. There are so many things that could be done, that need to be done, that we're just not doing, that would benefit everybody and our future.
If we were creating, I want to have a country where we're creating so many damn jobs where we have to have migrant labor come in. Like, we need to like and I heard I think it was Tulsi Gabbard who said that all the programs that her and Bernie supported would actually require a lot of migrant labor because it would create so many jobs that there would not be enough people to go around with the jobs created. So we would have to rely on migrant labor, maybe from a country like the Philippines, where they have, and they need their own reforms as well, but we can rely on labor from the Philippines, Indonesia, many Southeast Asian countries.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into the. I'm not opposed to migrant labor. I want to make sure that people in this country are employed, and I want to make sure that any workers who do come to this country are not exploited, and I want to make sure that our trade policies are not exploiting workers around the world. There's a lot about our trade policies that leads to exploitation and sweatshops and abuses of labor rights around the world. And we need to put a stop.
And that's
to all
why,
that.
and we also need workers' right to organize and a workers' right to unionize.
Yep,
that would be beneficial. Scrap the take federal legislation like a federal job guarantee, which would ban right to work laws.
Yep.
And Jason, thank you for coming out. Like, where can do you have like any socials, or do you have like?
Well, people can see callforcongress.com there. I'm assuming that they're seeing the same thing that I'm seeing up on there. Jason Call, Washington 2nd District, callforcongress.com.
Mm-hmm.
I have an extremely detailed website. If people want to read about why I moved from the Democratic Party to the Green Party, that's on my About page. Very detailed issues pages. Rick's receipts. I'm going hard after Rick Larsen. I think people need to know what a terrible representative he is, particularly Democrats in this district who need to know that they are not well represented by this guy, that he takes money from the war machine, the fossil fuel industry, and lobbyists. And, he's just a terrible corporate representative. Member of the New Democrats, like a lot of them here in Washington state are, unfortunately. They're an explicitly anti-progressive caucus within the Democratic Party. But in my last two runs, I want people to know I got over 30,000 votes both times. So this is a serious and viable campaign. We have a top two primary in Washington state. Same as California, same as Louisiana. We do not have a party primary. That means however many people file for a particular seat, the people who earn the top two votes in the primary, they move on to go head to head in the general election. I came in.
When was your last election you ran in?
2022. So if you go to Ballotpedia,
okay,
and go to Washington 2nd District Ballotpedia and go, you'll see the stats for 2020 and 2022 race, which is what I ran in. In fact, I just updated my Ballotpedia profile for the 2024 race, where it now identifies me as running as a green. But I came in third place, and a close third place too. My goal is to activate youth in my district. Youth turnout in the primary in 2022, and that is, youth is expansive. That is like 18 to 34. Voted at less than 10% in the primary. That is abysmal. I want to do whatever I can to get to college age kids, to get to young working people, to get to even high school kids who are going to be voting for their first time, to say this is a campaign and I'm a candidate that is here for your future. Please register. It's same day registration in Washington State. Washington State, I can't imagine anybody making it easier to vote than we have it here in Washington State. Same day registration, all mail-in balloting. All you got to do, and you can register on primary day. You could register on general election day. They will get you a ballot, and all you got to do is submit your ballot into the ballot box or put it in the mail. It's so easy to vote. But we got to get people motivated to vote in this district, because if I had another 3,000 votes in 2020, I'd go head to head against Rick Larsen. I was so close in 2020 that they, in the district, when they after the census, when they redistricted, they literally made this district more conservative to help protect Rick Larsen. That's
Oh,
how
wow.
close
So they gerrymandered it to
they
benefit
they
him.
absolutely did. They absolutely gerrymandered it to protect Rick Larson. And so I ended up being about 6,000 votes behind in 2022. But we can make up this distance. I think the things that are on the table right now with climate, with healthcare, with housing, with with wages, all those things. Like when I transitioned to the Green Party from the Democratic Party, I didn't have to change a thing on my platform except to say, okay, I'm running as green now. All of my policies are the same. So I just need to motivate people like I am not part of this corrupt corporate duopoly. Please register to vote. Vote for me. Let's
Do you happen to have an accurate number on how many people in your district do not vote at all?
It's not as high as in most. Like I think we had overall about 35 or 40% turnout in the primary. I went out to Ohio to help Nina Turner run in her race in 2021 in her special election, and overall voting turnout in that district was somewhere around 17%. So we're twice as high in terms of turnout as I know some districts are, but the thing is, the 65 and older crowd who vote more conservatively, they vote at close to 50%, where the 34 and under crowd, they vote at less than 10%. So basically, I want to let them know that if you don't vote in the primary, you're handing this election to whoever your grandparents want to see elected.
And one thing is about the Green Party, I think if we had candidates like you who are for because the number one issue facing my generation, which is the millennial generation, along with Gen Z, the generation after me, is the number one issue that they really have is not wanting to go to school, college, because of the high cost.
Yeah.
So if you literally went and hired like a youth voter outreach director in your district,
we're working on it.
literally have them on the ground talking with the youth, those who are going to be between the ages of 18 and 34 by the time the next election cycle hits. Get them to register by the primary as a Green Party candidate, because I'm well aware that you do have Green Party ballot access.
We don't have any kind of ballot access like that. We have no party registration in Washington State. When you register
so it's
Washington, everybody is an independent. That's why we have open primaries. We do not have party primaries.
Okay, I didn't know. I didn't know if the Green Party had like access to the ballots.
We don't need ballot access. I mean, there's no such thing as quote unquote ballot access. The ballot access in Washington State is you pay a filing fee or you go gather a number of signatures, and it doesn't matter what party you're in. So I would need to either gather 1,740 signatures or pay $1,740 to get the ballot access.
Okay, cool.
That's all I've got to do. We've already raised the money to get on the ballot. I'm not going to worry about ballot access signatures. We're going to be on the ballot. That's not a thing. What you're talking about with youth outreach, if I can address this, raising money as a Green Party candidate is much, much more difficult than raising money as a Democrat. I raised $185,000 in 2022. We're not even close, and we probably won't even be close. So I would encourage people who have the funds, and I know that my audience and my support base probably are not terribly wealthy. I get that. And so, I encourage people
go on Jason's website and go to where it says contribute and contribute what you can.
And if people could set up a monthly contribution, like, hey, I can afford to give $10 a month to this candidate, send it up as a $10 a month thing. And if I had every green in the country commit to $5 a month to my campaign, we'd be incredibly well funded. The reality is, though, probably less than 3% of the general population ever donates to any political candidate. So when you shrink that down to what percentage of that is actually Green Party members or who would give to a Green Party candidate, we're now talking about a very small pool of people who are giving money to Green candidates. So it is a struggle to raise those funds. And I say that because you said, you should hire a youth director. I would love to hire all sorts of people to help me win this race, but I cannot do it without them.
I used to work for a couple years, maybe 2 or 3 years. I used to work in voter outreach and worked as a strategist here in Georgia in the Democratic Party, of course. And I finally had enough. Like this past election cycle, like 6 weeks before the election, I threw my hand up and I was like, the heck with this. I'm done. I've had enough of trying to work with people that do not want to listen. Went independent, and then I know you know Madeline Hoffman, or know of her, and Brandy.
I know Brandy. I don't think I know Madeline.
Okay, but you know Brandy and Joe, and they pretty much brought me home to the Green Party.
Cool.
And what I am wanting to do with the Green Party goes far beyond Cornell West. And the vision that I have is to build a broad coalition of Greens and get them elected, whether it's to the local level, whether it's like your city councils, county commissioners, school boards, state legislative positions, and so forth. Yeah, like that's what I want.
We need to do it. Well, Cornell's not running as a Green anymore.
Yeah, I knew that, but what I've heard was because of how restrictive ballot access was in so many states.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's a ballot access issue so much as it is being constrained by the rules and regulations of a political party for a candidate who is a very independent-minded person, kind of wants to run his race his way. I think it's more of that and feeling constrained within a party system than it is a ballot access issue, to tell you the truth.
Like I've heard cases like New York State right now, it's like 450, if not 500,000.
It's not that. I don't think it's that much. I think it's around 50,000. But it's a lift. I mean, there's no question about it. It's a lift.
I'm gonna have to ask my friend Cora Emanuel, who is from New York State, about that.
Well, I was ready to take a trip out to I'm reading what Brandy's saying about Madeline. Yeah, I don't recognize the name.
Yeah, she ran as she ran as a Green Party candidate and all that. And Dee right there, who was around the world with Dee and friends, also said Cuomo increased the amount of signatures needed for ballot access.
I knew he had done that.
Like it is so restrictive.
One of the things that I'll just say directly impacted the plans that I had. So Washington's right next door to Idaho. We wouldn't have a problem getting Dr. West on the ballot here in Washington State. But Idaho may have had some trouble. So a political candidate who is not Green Party is not recognized as an official party, but an independent candidate can gather 1,000 signatures and get on the ballot there. So the goal was we were going to get Cornell West on as an independent in Idaho by gathering about 2,000 signatures just to make sure that we eclipse the 1,000 that's needed. And then he would have that access there, and then everybody would know he's running as a Green candidate, although it would say independent on their ballot. But the Green Party itself needs 17,000 signatures to get statewide ballot access. So I was planning on going out to Idaho to gather ballot access signatures for Cornell. I have now canceled those plans because there's no way we can get 17,000 signatures on a week-long trip. So I hope the Green Party can get ballot access in Idaho at some point, but I don't think it's going to happen in this cycle, not without an actual candidate who can put their name down. Anyway. So for people who are still listening, let me just say about my race again. This is potentially the best shot that the Green Party has at getting a federal seat this year. I've run twice before, come in third twice before. All I need is second. If I and a Republican will not win the seat. The seat is not geared to a Republican to win. 10% of the districts in the entire country are competitive. This is not one of them in terms of DNR, but it may. I firmly believe that if I am on the ballot next to Rick Larsen, I can beat him head to head in the general election. But I've got to get past that primary and get second place on the primary ballot. So I do hope.
Do y'all have like candidate debates between you? Let's say you get on the ballot as the primary winner. Do you get to like debate him?
So he would not debate me before the primary, for sure. There is no political advantage to him to debating me or acknowledging my candidacy prior to the ballot. So we have challenged him to debates, and he has simply ignored us in the past. If I make it past the primary, I think he would be compelled to debate. And I can tell you right now, I would clean up in a debate with this guy. There's no doubt about it.
But I've dropped for all that's watching before we end tonight's show, I did make sure to take and put Jason's campaign information. You can go and find all that through his About Me section. There's a contribute button up there on the right-hand corner of the screen as well for those who want to make monthly donations to his campaign, so that way he can get more money as a candidate to increase his likelihood of winning. And he really needs a strong ground game, like a true grassroots movement targeting key demographics in his community and across his district. Like if I were in his district right now, damn well I would be going across there like hotcakes, wearing one of your T-shirts everywhere I go. I'd probably wear that campaign. I'd probably have to get like a couple of your campaign T-shirts just to if I were to walk around that right there is good publicity. There is wearing a campaign T-shirt,
sure,
because that would spark curiosity.
Well, you can see the sign. We had signs all over the district last time around. Signs aren't everything. And, actually politically, statistically, they've said that signs don't make a ton of difference, but it is some. But really, it is being able to hire staff to get that on the ground engagement. And I've traveled all over district, and I will continue to travel all over the district and talk to whoever wants to talk to me. We're actually doing outreach to college campuses. Next week, I've got some people here in the local Green Party who have been very supportive of my campaign, who are doing some phone banking for me next week to see if we can have.
Do you have any way, for my audience here tonight, do you have any links and such where people can join in? Even for people that don't live in your district but are compassionate about getting a Green elected regardless of where they're at.
So the best thing to do is on my homepage. If you just go to my website, you should see on the homepage, sign up to volunteer. If you want to be on you can sign up to be on our mailing list, or you can sign up to be a volunteer. And then just get us your information. And as we grow the team, we will be in touch. I don't want to say I'm going to be able to put you in touch, put you to work right away, because we're still, scraping for funding for some things, for resources. But get us your information if you want to help. And at some point we will have some outreach work for you. And I've got a good team around me, and we can figure those things out. For sure.
And also, don't forget, if you want Medicare for all, go vote for him.
Yeah, for sure. And all my other socials are Call for Congress also. Twitter, Instagram.
Okay, cool. I saw the whole. I'm gonna take real quick and paste your socials link to my thing right here, so that way everybody can go to your social feeds. Like, I've even seen where some candidates will even create a link tree
Yeah,
page.
I should probably do a link tree. That's not a bad idea. In the private chat, Greg, I put the only social that is different is my TikTok,
Okay,
and so
cool.
it's call for Congress _ WA-02 is my TikTok.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna copy and paste that as well. And I,
Hey
I
man, yeah,
seriously think,
should do a link tree.
and this is an idea that I'm giving you as somebody who wants to see you get elected. Please utilize TikTok because TikTok can really help you with reaching out to the youth.
I've been doing it in the last month. You'll see that there's not a lot of posts on my TikTok page. I think maybe I got 7 or 8 of them, but they've all been in the last few weeks where I am every few days. I'm trying to take an issue and I'm trying to talk about a particular issue. My problem on TikTok is getting my content down to, can I get everything I want to say inside of a minute before people get bored with it and switch to the next thing. So that's
I think they switched it where you can, and also you can also take and do like Facebook Reels, Instagram Reels, and
yeah.
make them public as well. Try that on your campaign pages and see just how that helps and all that. And I'm more than willing to help you in terms of phone banking, and I'm sure that many others in the network of Red Berets can help you. Like, we will join forces to get your ass elected.
Yeah, I love it. Anybody who wants to help out, get in touch with me. You can email me directly, jason@callforcongress.com. And we will figure out how to best put people to work who want to see us elected. Again, I can't stress enough that this is probably the best chance in the country to get a Green Party elected to Congress.
Awesome. And I really do thank you for coming out, and I'm looking forward to everybody getting that is watching this, because I did share this video in the Green Party of the U.S. Facebook page,
Okay.
and also the one of the Washington Facebook groups of the Green Party.
Okay.
And
I'm sure I know the people who are running those pages.
Yeah. But I did make sure to share this afternoon when I was getting everything set up for the show.
Perfect.
And I thank you so much again for coming. Like, it's been a pleasure to interview you. Like,
thank you.
And I look forward to seeing where we can go with this campaign and watch it literally grow like immensely. Like, when is your primary date for?
Primary date it's the first Tuesday in August, which I want to say is the 6th, but maybe it's the 8th. So let me just pop open my calendar here. August the 6th. It is the 6th of August.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So August the 6th. So we have plenty of time to work to get you that notoriety that you need. Like, is there like any funding deadlines that we need to know or anything?
No, there's no funding deadlines. Just if you can kick us some dollars, then kick us some dollars. We are holding and promoting and advertising a town hall that I'm going to do. What is it? Saturday. So not tomorrow, Sunday, but the following Sunday. So 8 days from now, Sunday the 15th, I'm going to be doing a town hall. You can go on Facebook and register for that. There's a Zoom link on there, and basically you register for the Zoom. It's a Zoom thing. We're going to do about an hour and a half, probably having a lot of the same kind of conversation, but I want people to bring their questions, hear me give my little spiel as a candidate, and then we can do some engagement around particular policy or issues about how I'm going to win the race. And then just so you know, the Washington State Green Party has applied, petitioned to have the Green Party's convention next year, the presidential nominating convention, which happens every 4 years, to have that physically in my district, about 25 miles north of Seattle. We've got a proposed location, and we made our pitch, and so I hope mid-July through August, whenever they decide that it's going to be, that they will select Linwood, Washington, which is in my district, as the place to hold the Green Party National Convention. for 2024, and that we can invite people into this district not only to support whoever the eventual Green Party presidential nominee is, but also as a boost to my race.
And also your local economy as well.
Absolutely. Yep. All right.
Yeah.
Well, been a pleasure, Greg. Thank you.
Take it easy, man. And for everybody around, there's links all in the description in the video chat as well. Support this guy because he's a really great man, and I hope to see him get elected. Like I really hope to see him get elected and many other Greens like him, because we're going to need people like Jason to help us with dumping the corruption in government, so that way we can have a functioning government that works for us, not against us. And thank you so much for coming out. And I wanted to say good night to everybody and have a great rest of your night, everybody.
Appreciate the opportunity, Greg. We'll catch you around.
You too, brother. And I'll send you a copy of this after.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye, everyone.
Y'all heard it here first, folks. We're going to help get him elected, because we need more people like him running. Thank y'all so much for tuning in, and have a great night.